We'll begin with these two topics. It's interesting because they really speak of the two sides of life, of the two entries of life. The first one speaks of burials and cemeteries, and the other one speaks of weddings. So here we go. I'm just going to read the question and then I'll try to answer it. Even though this one is quite a long one, maybe I should summarize it. But all right, fine. So the first question for today's topic discussion is as follows. I have a whole lot of questions around Jewish burials and cemeteries. I'm asking out of practicality. Here it goes. Bear with me. I'm thinking of purchasing a plot and making burial plans. My parents made all of their funeral arrangements in advance, and that made all the decisions making easier for me and my siblings. Are there any guidelines? Is it just personal choice? Should we be buried near family members? How important is that? Is a beautiful location with, or should we be buried in a beautiful location but with strangers around? What then? That's one part of the question. Another part of the question is what qualifies someone to be buried in the Orthodox section? So, for example, here at Mount Sinai, at the Jewish cemetery here, you have Orthodox section, you have conservative section, and so on. What qualifies someone to be buried in the Orthodox section? Is it better to be buried in a certain direction? Should the head always be facing east? Now, another question: what should I look for and ask about when looking for a plot that I hope I won't need in many, many, many years? Now, should the casket be of pine box? What material? How should we be buried, in shrouds or with our clothing? What are the requirements for proper procedure when death is imminent and immediately after death? And what could I arrange now? So basically, there's a question on death altogether, the Jewish way to die and the Jewish way also to be buried. So I'm going to try and cover all of those little topics, those subtopics very quickly, but again, feel free to ask your questions. So preparing to die or buying a plot. So first of all, yes, it is encouraged to buy a plot in one's lifetime. And in fact, there are sources that say that when a person buys a plot in one's lifetime, it's considered to be a good fortune to have a long life. So if you want to have a long life, you can buy a plot, your plot, in your lifetime, and that can add, according to this Jewish idea, it can add years to your life. So that's as far as buying a plot or not buying a plot. Where should you buy a plot? Obviously in the Jewish cemetery, and there are Jewish cemeteries in which there are very strict sections. Like we said, at Sinai, you have the Orthodox section, you have the conservative section, you have the Reform section, and so on. The difference between the sections is, number one, where you affiliate, and number two, also in the Orthodox section, for example, they only bury people who have Orthodox conversions or follow maybe Orthodox ways. Depends on the cemetery. Here, I know they're quite lenient. You have cemeteries. I know of a cemetery, for example, in New York, that's very, very strict. Not only do they bury only people who affiliate with Orthodox, but that lived, quote unquote, an Orthodox lifestyle. So it depends on the cemetery. Can't answer this question because really it depends on the cemetery. Next, when you are buried, should you be buried in a pine box? What type of wood? Should it be, I don't know, oak wood? What? So for that, really, Judaism says that there is no difference whatsoever. In fact, one should be buried in a simple casket because we are all for modesty. We are all for humility. I understand sometimes people want to honor their loved ones by being buried in a very expensive and fancy casket. But let me share with you a little secret. That casket eventually decomposes. So really, there's not much point, not much logic to it either, even though I understand the sentiment and the emotion towards it. I will say, though, that it's interesting to note, if we're already speaking about a casket, that in Israel, the dead are not buried in a casket. Here outside of Israel, that are buried in a casket. There is one exception in Israel, and that is soldiers. Soldiers are buried in a casket. Soldiers who come back from war are buried in a casket. Why? Because some, unfortunately, don't come back in one piece. So not to differentiate between one soldier and the other, they are all buried in a casket. But other than soldiers, everyone is not buried in caskets in Israel. They are buried just in a talit, as you may have seen, and the body goes straight into the ground. The reason is because Israel, of course, is the Holy Land. The soil of Israel is holy. And therefore, the body being buried is now surrounded by holiness. And that's good for the body. Now, outside of Israel, the soil is not holy. And therefore, we separate between the holy body and the soil itself, which is not holy. That's why we bury the casket outside of Israel. That's the, yes, please. Yes, yeah. We're completely covered, obviously, but yes, yeah.
Are the soldiers, is there soil in the casket of the soldiers?
Is there soil in the casket?
Yeah,
just yes. So that I'm going to get to that. What is put in the casket, whether you have a casket or whether you are buried, shrouded with a talit. So that's the next point, right? So all Jews, all Jewish mortuaries also keep soil from Israel, and soil particularly from the Mount of Olives. I'll explain why. But when a person is buried, whether he's in Timbuktu or in Scottsdale, Arizona, they first put that soil inside the casket before they actually bury. Why? Because we believe that the dead will be resurrected from the Mount of Olives. And those who don't have soil may have to roll underground, as the Midrash says, all the way to Mount of Olives and resurrect from there. But if you have a piece of the Mount of Olives with you, then you don't have to roll, because you'll be resurrected from the Mount of Olives. And therefore you have some soil from the Mount of Olives in the casket. Also, it is to recognize that every Jew has its connection not just to heaven, but also to the Holy Land of Israel, particularly to the holiest site in Jerusalem, the Temple Mount, and that's where the Mount of Olives is. So it's to create that spiritual connection too. Now, in addition to, so, and that's done also for soldiers in Israel. They do receive some soil from the Mount of Olives. Now, those who are buried in the Mount of Olives obviously don't have to, because they're buried in the Mount of Olives. The way a person is buried, before we even get to what he's wearing or she's wearing, but there are some crucial steps. Step number one is to ensure that the body is buried as quickly as possible. When a person dies, we want to make sure with the mortuary, with the cemetery, that the process happens as quickly as possible. Why? Because our soul and our body in this world are married. They work together, right? I can't do a mitzvah. My soul can't do a mitzvah without the help of the body. And my soul can't live without the help of the body. The body needs to nourish itself, and vice versa also. The body is not complete without the soul, because the soul is what elevates it, what makes it holy, right? So there is a great partnership between the soul and the body in each and every one of us. When a person dies, the soul and the body are separated. But on the other hand, they still have this connection. It's like a married couple. They've been married for a long time. Once they are separated, there's great emotion there. Now, when the soul is separated from its body, it looks down on its body and it says, oh, it's not buried yet. I can't rest. I'm married to this body. So I can't rest. I cannot feel secured until the body is resting. So by delaying the burial, we're also delaying the rest of the soul. The soul wants to rest, but it can't, because its partner, the body, is not yet resting. By the way, that's one of the most beautiful ideas in Judaism, I believe, because I've been to, unfortunately, many mortuaries, and I think Jews deal with the bodies of the dead ones, of the deceased, in such dignity, with such respect, that I haven't seen any other religion do that. So it's really quite special. But that's step number one. So do it as quickly as possible. Step number two is to ensure that the body is not left alone until its actual funeral. And therefore, there's this concept called shomer, which means guardian. And that's really a person that comes and guards the body, but doesn't just guard the body like a bodyguard standing and doing nothing, but rather saying psalms, saying prayers, mainly psalms. Why? Because the soul understands that language. Soul understands holy language, and therefore it comforts the soul when it sees that someone is guarding over its partner, and at the same time that someone is guarding over its partner with the language that it understands, with holiness, with that which can truly guard the body spiritually. So there's a shomer that needs to be guarding the body after the time of that a person is deceased. After we've secured an accelerated funeral and a shomer, then the mortuary takes the body and gives it what's called a tahara. That's also a very vital and crucial part of the preparation of the burial. Tahara in Hebrew literally means the purification. We are purifying the body. What does it mean to purify the body? The body basically is cleansed completely. It's cleansed so that even the nails are cleaned. So that if, God forbid, there is any blood, any wound that's on the body, that too is clean. And if there's blood that really is still, in a way, not clean, it's still all over, when it is cleaned with a wet towel, that wet towel goes in the casket. Why? Because the blood is the life force of a human being. And being that it's the life force of a human being, it's therefore part of the body. We don't want to take that blood out and then bury only 99.9% of the body. We want to bury 100% of the body. If the blood is part of the body, so we have to bury it too, and therefore that blood is also put in the casket. Tahara. Now, the Tahara is when we not just clean the body, but the body then is immersed in a mikvah, or 3 big buckets of water are poured on the body. And that is to purify the body, because we believe in the idea of the mikvah. That's what the notion of mikvah all stands for. A mikvah in Judaism, it's not just a nice ritual bath, it's not just a nice spa and jacuzzi, as it is of a year, by the way. If you've been to a mikvah, you know, it's like a 5-star Ritz-Carlton type of spa. But it's not just that, it's really immersing ourselves in rainwater. And we immerse ourselves in rainwater to go back to the very foundation of our creation, in which we were also surrounded by natural water in the womb of our mother. And each time we go to the mikvah, it's as if we are going back to the very source of our creation and going and being born again, so to speak. And in order to therefore purify the body so that it is ready to be received up high, or that its soul at least can be received up high, knowing that its body is completely pure, then we purify this body, we engage in what's called Tahara. Now, after the Tahara, that's when the body is clothed. The body is clothed in the most simple material, simple clothing, has to be completely white. White is, Kabbalistically, it is the color of purity. And again, we want to send a message that this body is pure and the soul can therefore rest. And the soul also can be judged that it handled its body with purity. Now, it just has one covering. By men, it's pants and a shirt or whatever it is. And by women, it's a dress or whatever that is, but nothing fancy, because again, we are modest. But there's a deeper reason. Adam, the first human being, was told by God, Mina afarata vela afar tashuv, which means from dust you came, and from dust you will return. Now, if we are full of clothes, we are not really returning to dust, because all these clothes are separating between us and the dust. So in order to fulfill that verse, we really try to dress in the most modest way, and at the same time with just 1 or 2 layers. Now, I know I've been asked many times, can my grandfather, can my grandmother, can this person, can that person be buried with its favorite shirt, with its favorite socks, with its... No, they can't. According to Jewish law, they can't. Why? Because it also comes to share yet a third message. And that is that in life, we really don't own anything. After 120, nothing comes with us. Not even a pair of socks. Nothing. You know what we truly own? What we gave. What we gave to others, the way we impacted others, we touched others, that stays in the hearts of people forever and ever. Now, if we take a pair of socks, it's also almost going against what we really believe. That, oh, you can own a pair of socks. Look, it's going with you. So it goes against that message. And therefore, also, in addition to the reasons we already stated, no socks, nothing is allowed. Okay, so that's the way the body is prepared for the funeral and is placed in the casket. Yes?
So growing up, my family used to say to me, if you get a tattoo, you can't get buried in an Orthodox cemetery. Is that true?
I've heard this many times, and it's a myth. It's really a myth, like some other myths. But there's no source. I researched this many times. I asked many people. No one can find a reliable Jewish source for this.
But has anybody been buried with a tattoo?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I bury people with tattoos. Yes. Yeah. 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 Absolutely. Yeah. Yes.
Is it against the Jewish faith to have an autopsy?
Okay. Good question. So it is against the Jewish faith to not only have an autopsy, but to even touch the body after death, out of complete respect for the body. By the way, it's important to note, because one of the laws, when a person, we don't speak about the moment of dying, we're speaking about after that moment. But during the moment of dying, one shouldn't touch the body, or at least if we know that touching can, God forbid, accelerate the death, even just a little bit, we shouldn't be touching the body. If it's not accelerating that, maybe yes. But once a person is deceased, one cannot touch the body whatsoever, out of respect for the body, and also because there's this law, these laws of impurity. We don't become impure, even though we will become impure eventually by carrying the casket and so on and so forth, but also to maintain the dignity and respect of the body and maintain our purity as best as we can. Now, therefore, autopsies are not allowed in cases that are extreme and law requires it. Then sometimes you can fight with the law. I've been successful in fighting with the law and annulling potential autopsies. In some cases, I remember I was living in Atlanta. There was unfortunately a 6-month-old baby who died, and the laws of Georgia were very, very strict about this, and the baby needed an autopsy. So there was nothing we can do. And then, but when you see I'm not going to get into details, but I did the Tahara for that body, and really it's the most disgraceful thing.
But if it's a suspicious death, like thinking a homicide, where
Right.
somebody's been poisoned.
Fine, yes. So that's what I'm saying. In extreme cases, yes. Yeah. It's a good question. So donating the parts of your body. So the big question is, what really happens to those parts? That's the big question. If they really go to save lives, then Judaism is all for it. But very often these parts end up in a lab and nothing happens to them, and they really don't go. If you know that it's going immediately to save someone's, for sure. But I don't know if there's a way to know exactly where these parts end up. So it could be problematic. In Israel, they have all these details lined out in a card that you sign, and they are aware that they will only take your part if they are aware of someone else that needs that part after you die, and I'll give it to that person. In America, I don't know how detailed it is, and therefore Judaism has its own skeptic about it. Yes, Benita.
Is there an dispute? Is there
Right.
to
Right. Open casket. Yeah. Yeah.
It's unbelievably, in Philadelphia, it's very common in Jewish funerals.
Right. 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 Unfortunately. Right. So no, Jewish law is also very clear about this. There's no viewing of the body. And in fact, as soon as a person dies, that the deceased needs to be covered completely. And from that point on, one cannot see the deceased body. Why? Again, out of respect for the body. They wouldn't want to be seen in this situation. So out of respect, we don't see it. Yes, Anita.
However,
Yeah.
my parents were both living here and buried in
Mm-hmm.
burial and and when we got to New Jersey, somebody had to identify.
Okay.
Because of traveling
For sure.
from here to
Right.
So there was a very brief.
Right. Absolutely. For any reason of identification, whether it's reasons like that, we just had in our community someone's body was transported from Italy, and they needed to identify it when it reached America. So yeah, absolutely. To identify the body when it's allowed. Unfortunately, some soldiers don't come back from war alive, right, in Israel, and they too need to be identified. So for identification reasons, of course, you're right. The viewing is allowed. But just as part of the ceremony, or to try and soothe our personal emotions, sorry, the deceased emotions come first, and the deceased respect comes first. Yes.
Man that was Orthodox that passed over, and I remember the wife had said the nurse could not be in the room with him after he died. It would have to be a man. Is that?
No, I haven't heard of that. The nurse especially? No. No, the body can't be left alone. So the relatives very often want to stay there because they want to guard the body, and that's understandable. But for a nurse not to go, I never heard of such a thing.
No? Yeah.
Yes.
The body can't be left alone, but I think since you said your parents, my mother is going to be transported to Indiana at this point. How does that happen? How does that work if the body's not going to be?
So no, that's a good question. So because you have to fly the body there, right? So up until the flight, there's someone at the body, and then from the flight onwards, there's always people in the airplane and so on. And then very often one, and it's good to do this, one is encouraged to fly in the same flight, so that they may not be actually side by side, but they're at least in the same airplane. And then when the deceased lands, then you can continue to be with the deceased also. They have to be as together as possible. You have to be as guardian of the body as possible. Yes.
You can make the arrangement to have the shomer come.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that in town, the Sinai mortuary has shomrim, a whole list of shomrim that they call when that happens.
If it's a female, it could be a male.
So good question. Usually out of respect, again, out of modesty, for females, and for men. Yeah. Now, sometimes it's, it's not the case. It's not like a must, but that's the preferable way. Okay. So we spoke about, the casket and then the burial itself. So I just want to relate to some of these questions here. So does the body need to be facing east? That was one of the questions. When we bury a body, does it need to be facing east? The answer is that it's preferable if it faces east, just for the sentimental idea behind it, that east is facing Jerusalem, and we want the body to be connected to Jerusalem, at least spiritually speaking, directed towards Jerusalem. But it's not a must. The body is not facing east. It's just fine also. And sometimes I will tell you this. If you've been to New York to the grave of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, blessed memory, you'll see that behind the grave, his secretaries, the people who were with him 24/7 almost, they are buried in an opposite direction compared to all of the other graves. All the other graves are buried kind of east, except for the 3 that are buried west. They are buried behind the Rebbe's grave. Why? Because they wanted their heads to be as close to the Rebbe as possible. So there you go. So it doesn't have to be east. And here you're talking about great men who wanted to be closer in their heads to a holy person. And that's also just fine. Yes, Sarah. Good question. No, they don't. No, it's completely no tzitzis or anything like that. But you can add, that's a good point, because you remind me of something else. You can add a mitzvah to the casket. Therefore, many men are buried with their talit. And that's to come and tell God, when they go up to the heavens, you see, even the soul can point to the body. So you see, this is a mitzvah that I'm carrying with me, along with the other mitzvahs.
Can't you donate something?
You could, yes, you're right. Yeah. You can donate talits for that, for the dead to be buried in a talit. Yeah, if they don't have any. Okay, so that's the east or west question. So that's that. Now, the burial itself also, just to go all the way, the burial itself should be preferably performed by Jews. Now, what does that mean? Very often, even in a cemetery here, it's the staff of the cemetery that comes and pours the soil on the casket, and they are the ones also who then put that stone on the casket, as is the custom here or state law of here. But it's better for Jews to do it. Why? Because the soul would feel, if it's a Jewish soul, the soul would feel comfortable if it's family that takes care of its body. We trust family naturally more than we trust strangers. And therefore, when the soul sees, oh, my partner is being taken care of with family, and they are taking care of my partner, the body, then it soothes the soul. And therefore, you may have noticed, if you've been to funerals over here in the Sinai Cemetery, that if I'm officiating, I'd very often ask the tractor driver to play with his stick in order to move the soil, so that at least I take part in pouring the soil on the casket. And therefore, also, we encourage many people to come and pour the soil on the casket also, so that the soul can see, oh, these people, my family is taking care of me, I'm calmer. Now, it is, by the way, considered to be a great mitzvah because we're helping to build a final resting place for our loved ones. Yes? Mm-hmm. It's like a draw. I've seen that. Yeah. No, yeah. No, and look, that's not against Jewish tradition. I just want you to know. In fact, one of the largest cemeteries in the world is a cemetery in Israel, in Jerusalem, out of all places, called Har HaMenuchot, and there they have that system too, beyond the graves that they have interred in earth. But I will tell you this: that in these types of graves, they also put soil and all sorts of other things, so to fulfill, like the verse that we were speaking about, from dust you came, to dust you will return, and so on. So and when the burial takes place in a place like this, you too can pour soil. You too can help the burial process altogether. Yeah. Yes, Benita. Right. No, it's very common. Very, very common. It's common in Israel quite a bit. In fact, I think the Mount of Olives, that's the only way they do it now, for space reasons. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, Jackie. Yeah. Right. Good point. So when we pour that soil, right, when everyone participates in pouring that soil in a burial place, so we want to show that it's hard for us to do so, because death is hard on anybody, and we want to also show our solidarity with the mourners. So when we take that shovel, what we do is that first and foremost, the first pouring is done with the back of the shovel, not the front of the shovel, as if like, I don't really want to do, I have to, I'm forced to do it, but I don't want to. I wish this death would have not happened. That's what it expresses. So you pour it at the back, and then you can continue with the front of the shovel. When you are finished, you're right, you put back the shovel in the soil. You don't hand it over, as if to say, hey, none of us here is happy doing this. We're not going to kumbaya now and do some type of football gathering, shoulder on shoulder, and we'll do this happily together. So we put it back in the soil to show our reluctance to. Yeah. Okay, good point. Yeah, so we didn't speak of the dying process, but we did speak now. But it's a good point. When a person is in the process of dying, or when a person has taken his last breath, then the relatives in the room, or anyone in the room, should open a window. If there's no window, at least a door. Why? To symbolize that the soul is not leaving, and to give room for the soul to leave. Good point. Yes, Sarah.
So in England, very often people, the family who are mourning, take their shoes and socks off and walk barefoot,
right,
backwards and forwards.
Right.
And also there's always washing stations.
Right.
And here there isn't many washing stations.
Unfortunately, no. Yeah, you're right. I just did an unveiling this morning. There was no washing station. So look, first of all, that custom is a beautiful custom. It's a custom that we are mourning now, and therefore any type of it's the same reason we don't wear leather shoes on the 9th of Av, on the day in which the temples were destroyed. We are mourning now, so we don't want to be comfortable. We want to show that we're mourning, that we are suffering, so we take off our shoes. So that's sometimes demonstrated at the funeral itself in the cemetery. Now, it's also demonstrated at home. For people sitting Shiva, don't wear leather shoes, right? Also for the same reason. The washing station is for all those who participated in a funeral. When you go and you go back to your car, before you go back to your car, you wash your hands. Why? Because the cemetery is the place of the dead. The death in Judaism is impurity. So you want to purify yourself after coming in touch with impurity. So you wash your hands. That's right. Now, if there is no washing station at the funeral, so at your first opportunity, when you get home or when you go back to your office or whatever it is, that's when you wash your hands. Yes, Jen. Yeah. Yeah.
Back to the burial, I've been to a couple of funerals where they filled it completely. There was the family.
Right.
They filled it all the way. Is
Right.
that
Right.
customary to complete? Because I've seen it both ways.
Right. It is customary. Yes, you're right. And it's preferable, in fact, that the casket or the burial place is completely filled before the mourners actually say Kaddish and before the funeral ends. Why? Again, because we know that the soul is not fully resting until the body has been taken care of. So we want to ensure that the body is taken care of as quickly as possible. And there's really almost no point in saying Kaddish and continuing with our mourning if our soul is still suffering, is hovering upon the grave and not settling down because its burial place hasn't been finalized or finished. So that's true. It is preferable indeed. Yeah. Yes.
He sat low.
Right. Shiva services. Yeah. No, I mean, it is part of the Jewish law, the Jewish customs to sit in the low stool. There are many laws that pertain then to the mourners. The mourners sit Shiva for 7 days. The day of the funeral is considered one full day already, no matter what time the funeral was. Now, they go back home and they mourn. Part of the mourning is to cover the mirrors, to sit on low stools, to show, even when you sleep, you should sleep without, if your custom is to sleep with 5 pillows, you should sleep with 4 pillows. If your custom is to sleep with 2 pillows, you should sleep with 1. If 1 pillow, you should sleep with 0 pillow. You should take out a pillow. Should be a little bit uncomfortable. The other custom is, of course, not to take showers unless really, really, really necessary. The other custom is not to shave or not to cut our hair. The other custom is not to cut our nails. So there are multiple customs that relate, again, to this pain and to the suffering and the mourning altogether. Yes, sir.
Going to the cemetery.
Good question. So the Kohanim should not become impure. Why? Because we really believe that Mashiach can come at any second. If Mashiach comes now and the temple is built now, we'll need Kohanim to go and serve. Those were the only ones allowed to serve. You can't serve in the temple if you're impure. So we beg the Kohanim, maintain your purity, because Mashiach can be coming now. And if you don't maintain your purity, we'll have no one there to go and serve. And we want to serve in the temple as soon as possible. That's why, by the way, Kohanim also should not get drunk. So you can't serve when you're drunk. And things like that. But cemeteries make you impure. So the Kohanim are kept outside, not outside of the cemetery, but usually Kohanim are buried only on the front lane or not the outside. I don't want to call it the outside. By the pathway. That's right. Why? Because the relatives, the Kohanim are allowed to become impure for their relatives, obviously, but not for the others. So they can access the graves of their loved ones immediately without having to become impure by passing through the other graves. Now, there is another way to go about it. By the way, the graves of the righteous don't make you impure. Why? Because their body was used entirely for holiness, and therefore they transform their body into holy bodies while they were alive. And those holy bodies can make you impure because they're holy. Now, going back to Lubavitcher Rebbe, he's buried in the middle of a cemetery. So what do the Kohanim do? They can go to the Rebbe's grave because it won't make them impure. This was a righteous man. So they've built a pathway with a fence on both sides of the pathway that basically separates people from those graves. With that separation, they are not really becoming impure because of that separation. Then it leads them directly to the grave. Or they can be creative and walk into a box, a squared box, a big one, to separate themselves from the other graves, which I've seen people do, Kohanim do also. Yes. Okay, good question. So,
What's the question?
how long does do we believe the soul hovers over the body? So, the first 3 days are the toughest day for the soul, because the soul doesn't exactly know what it is. It's like a married couple again. A married couple that's separated after many years, the soul says, 1 second, who am I? My identity was my spouse. Now, like, who am I? And it takes time for the soul then to transition to the next world. Also, because it was engaged in materialistic activities like eating or like sleeping, and now it's not, because it's a soul. So it says to itself, oh, I don't have these activities. I'm not with my partner, the body. So who am I? So what happens is that the soul comes and hovers over the body and says, is this me or is it not me? It's not me, it is me. That happens for the most serious effect on the soul is for the first 3 days. And that's why the first 3 days of Shiva are also considered the most painful ones, the most arduous ones for the soul. After 3 days, then the soul starts recognizing, oh, maybe that's not me. My body is not me anymore. I'm in a new world. And then by the end of the Shiva, that's when it says, okay, goodbye. I know who I think I am. I have to transition now. And then there's the Shloshim, which is the other level of ascent, and then the 11 months. But it usually takes, for the first 3 days, the soul is definitely still here on earth. After 3 days, it's still on earth, but now, fluctuating between the two worlds. And after 7 days, it makes the transition. Yeah. Yes.
Yes, but we believe in reincarnation.
That's right.
So that soul goes from one person to another.
Right. So reincarnation is a whole other topic. We can dedicate a whole class to it. But reincarnation is not necessarily with the entire soul. Sometimes it's just a part of our soul that comes back to this world to live in someone else, in a different body. It's the part of the soul that usually needs rectification. And a part of the soul remains up in heaven. So yes, we believe in reincarnation, but not of the entire soul, only parts of the soul. Yeah. Yes, Jackie. And then we'll get to the next question because I don't want to forget this question too. Yes. Yeah.
Going back to the burial, some reason I remember always doing it 3.
Right.
So there's any reason for
Good question. Yes. So you do it 3 times, at least 3 times. You can do it more. Why 3 times? Because in Judaism, the number 3 comes to establish a fact. It's what makes a fact a fact. For example, if a pet, a dog, attacks a person 3 times, according to Jewish law, he's not allowed to be domesticated anymore. Why? Because he's considered a dangerous animal. You can't domesticate a dog like that because it attacked 3 times. Once, it's not an established fact yet. Twice, neither. 3 times, oh, okay, this dog is dangerous. So that's the number 3 in Judaism. So therefore, you do it 3 times to establish that, yes, you've actually helped. Your help was veritable of building this final resting place. Okay, let's go to the next question. Okay, because it is also it's a long one, yeah. Okay, so then we have a little more time about death and dying. See, I was going to finish on that to finish positively, but now we're going to be morning all day. Okay, no, it's good. Yes. Oh, you did? So you'll send that for next class too?
No, I found it and we did discuss.
We did?
Like, who was Who was required to get a get?
Oh, yes. Thank you. Thank you. We discussed that. Okay, but a little more about good. Yes, Benita.
Us to give a good comeback. People who say, I'm going to be cremated because there's not enough land. Because because cemeteries are in disarray. And to just say, but it's not to do with faith. What's the good explanation that a lay person
Right.
say to another person?
Good question. Good question, because it's very prevalent, unfortunately. And Judaism is very against cremation, like very, very, very against cremation. It's one of the things that we abhor. And the reason for that is because, number one, we believe in this combination of the soul and the body. When the soul again sees its body not resting, it pains it. Imagine the soul sees its body going up in flames. It's like seeing your spouse going up in flames, God forbid. So it aches the soul even more so. Beyond that, we also believe that the body has some life. Some of our life is in our body. We use this body to live, to function, to do mitzvahs in this world. So we are burning a little bit of our lives by cremating it. Now, in addition to that, our body is not ours. That's why we're not allowed to tattoo the body. My body is not mine. I can't just do whatever. God gave me my body. It's like if I took this table and I started burning it. Am I allowed to burn this? It's not mine. It's the shul's. So I have no ownership over this body. Who am I to decide that I can just burn it? So these are three major example routes. Now, of course, there's more to it, but I will say all this applies to people who have intentionally decided to cremate the body. We have 6 million of our brothers and sisters who unfortunately were cremated. That doesn't apply to them whatsoever because it was against their will. And God knows that it was against their will, and their soul knows that it was against their will. So all the answers that we gave doesn't apply to them whatsoever. They were the holiest people. They rose all the way to the highest of the heavens. So, by the way, just to speak about that, I just want to say one thing, and then Elisabetta, and I've been raising your hand for a while. But speaking of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, when his predecessor died, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, he asked before he died that anyone who carries his casket, anyone who's the pallbearer, even the people who just touch the casket, should first go to the mikvah. So that it's as pure as could be. 1951 he passed. 1950 he passed. And of course, this was 5 years after the Holocaust. There were people who were Holocaust survivors with numbers on their arms who wanted to touch the casket. His son-in-law, the one who became the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, saw that these people with numbers are trying to touch the casket, and people say, no, you don't go to mikveh, you don't go to mikveh. And the Rebbe quoted the prayer of the high holidays, Aseh leman ba'esh uvamayim leman kiddush shemecha, which means, God, please, if you're not going to give us a good year for what we deserve, give us a good year in the merit of all those who went through fire and water in your honor. There are those who went through water, they went to the mikvah. But there are those who went through fire. Those are the Holocaust survivors. Those who went through fire and those who went through water are as pure as it gets, especially those who went through fire, because they had to go through tremendous pain for that. So let them touch the casket. So it's as equivalent as going to mikvah and even more so. Yes, Elisabetta. Yes. So we said no, that within 3 days is ready because the soul wants the body to rest. It was his partner. And the sooner the body rests, the sooner the soul will rest. So it's not at ease until it sees its body. That's why we have to accelerate the process. Yeah. Yes,
Is there
Sarah.
a certain time of day you should bury? Obviously not on Shabbat.
Right. So, not on Shabbat. It's interesting. It's a good question because in Israel only, people bury the dead at night. Outside of Israel, no. That's because we want to do it as soon as possible. And again, in Israel, the land is holy, and there's almost no obstruction between the moment of death to the burial. But the sooner the better. The sooner the better. Cemeteries open at 9 years, so 9:30. Yeah. Yes.
Like in Israel, if there's an accident or something, people that scrape up the blood to,
Zaka is a wonderful organization.
do they?
They
do
go to all the
something
terrorists.
like
They have organizations like Hatzalah that does that. But that's right. That goes back to the point we made, that blood is part of our body, and we want to be buried with as much body as possible,
So if
including
somebody
blood,
gets an amputation of their leg, or
with the amputation.
but 20 years later they die.
So it's a very good question. An amputated leg, better to keep it than be buried with it. Yes, you're right. If the leg is no more, then it's fine. And especially if so many years have gone by, it's not your body anymore. The soul is adjusted to having a body without a leg, so it doesn't hurt as much. But yeah, yes, Geraldine.
I don't know if it's Jewish, but some people, they claim that they died for a minute or two. Like, what did they see, or?
Like they call it NDEs, near-death experiences. Yeah, I've met quite a few people like that. People who've had near-death experiences. In fact, I met someone this morning who had a growth in his brain, and they did surgery, and during the surgery he had a whole revelation. We do believe in that. Look, we believe that we live in a two-dimensional world, not in a one-dimensional world. Sometimes we are blessed to be exposed to that other dimension. Sometimes we're not. But the near-death experiences are just exposures to that second world that we anyway believe in. Those who are fortunate enough to have seen it may have a greater mark on their lives from that second dimension. But we shouldn't wait for near-death experiences to experience the second dimension. I can tell you, you can experience it even without near-death experiences, even with a full, good, and healthy life. You just have to connect yourself to your soul, connect yourself to God, connect yourself to what is needed of you, not just what you need, and you'll experience that second dimension.